Right. Gina, thank you very much. Gina Ziervogel, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to talk about building transformative capacity, and I left the clicker behind. Thank you. And I come from a background where I'm particularly interested in climate risk in cities. And unfortunately, increasingly, we see that particular areas of the city are sticking on my, can I just pull it away a bit? Yeah. Are becoming increasingly exposed to climate risk. So as we see increasing numbers of people move to cities and move to slums, and we can see here that in 2011 there were 62% of the people who were in urban areas were in slums. As we increase the number of people living in urban areas, we're going to see increasing numbers living in these highly exposed areas, particularly exposed to climate risk. And we know that temperatures are increasing, and so we need to consider this specifically. And so in the field of climate change, we are interested in how people adapt to climate risks. But increasingly, we can't look at adaptation in isolation. You can't reduce climate risks without recognizing that there's so many stresses that people are exposed to. And so we need to move towards what I've called here as transformative adaptation. And in order to do that, we need capacity. And so I see autonomous adaptation as the things that people do automatically to respond to climate risk without thinking about long-term climate change. Planned adaptation is when you're thinking about the climate risk and you're trying to put in place measures to reduce that. So autonomous adaptation, 10 years ago, I was already planting water-wise plants in my garden because I can see water is a concern for me in my garden and I can't rely on watering them. Planned adaptation, during the drought, I put in a rainwater tank to try and manage the risk of the drought. Transformative adaptation is more around how the systems are starting to change and we recognize how interconnected everything is. So one can see evidence of this at various scales. The city of Cape Town, in taking responsibility for water into their own hands, thinking about water sources, and not necessarily relying on national government in the way they used to, is a way of them transforming the governance of water in Cape Town. But equally, some of the neighborhood groups that came together to think about what it meant if there was a day zero, who was most vulnerable, new ways of engaging and reducing risk that, yes, we're responding to the drought, but also we're building connection and capacity is what I see as more transformative adaptation. And the reality is that we need transformative capacity in order to do that. And interestingly, it links quite nicely to Amira's figure earlier as well of the sort of agency and social cohesion, the individual and the collective. So we need to build agency among ourselves as individuals, but we also need to build social cohesion, both within the groups that we're involved in and across groups that we might not normally engage across. And then we need to reconnect to life support systems. And I see life support systems quite broadly here, both to mean the sort of natural resources, water, land, food, but also thinking about the monetary system on which much of our day-to-day lives are based. And so my specific focus in this talk is around strengthening transformative capacity between government and the urban poor, and recognizing that often there are clashes and tensions between local government particularly and people living in informal settlements or low-income areas. And we need to think about how we can shift this because it has to be central to how we go forward, given the increasing numbers of people in informal settlements and the increasing frustration that people are feeling. And the recognition that government can't do everything, so we need to think about partnerships and participation. So I'm going to talk a bit about the FLOW project, which I think is a good example of building transformative capacity, and link back to what it means for thinking about co-creating resilience. So the FLOW project was funded by the Flemish government, and it was run through the University of Cape Town, but with Meshfield Sustainability, who helped to run it. And then we worked very closely with two specific areas, the Bergrivier municipality, which is about an hour and a half outside Cape Town in Piketberg, and then Kokstad in KwaZulu-Natal. And there was a lot of design thinking around how the project was conceptualized. And so a large part of it was around making systems thinking clear. What do we mean by a system? What are the parts of the system, and how do we make that visible? We've got to spend more effort in visualizing and making visible some of the parts that aren't often seen. We took an appreciative inquiry approach, and we really looked at what was working and looking at some of the positive aspects. We had a learning by doing approach. We had a lot of prototyping, rapid feedback, and there was a lot of reflection testing, and we created a space where we were able to do that with these ambassadors in these towns and with the local government over a few years. And so it was a very sort of participatory design process, and I'll speak a bit more, and you'll see in a video just now what kind of participation there was, because I agree that these types of workshops where you say, what do you think, is not really where participation's at for this type of work. And it was really a whole person, about whole person development. And for me, it's one of the best projects I've been involved in as an academic, because I was challenged a lot. I was growing, as were the others in the project as well. And so the focus of the project was looking at engagement between local government and the youth and local businesses. And the focus was really on the youth. And we wanted to move towards an engaged civil society, which is where we think we need to move to, ethical business, and a partner state, where local government is partnering and seen as a partner state. And so these are just photos of the two cohorts of FLOW ambassadors in Piketberg, the first cohort and the second cohort in 2016. And in trying to capture all that we learned, which was really hard to sort of put down because it was such a rich project in so many levels, we produced this book that is available at www.flowafrica.org, and it really helps to capture some of the stories that came out of the work we did. But I first want to show you a video, and then I will reflect more on it. So do I... And now I wait. Or push one forward. Sorry. I'll pause, wait for you. Thanks. So just to say, it's fine, we can keep playing as it starts. There are some Afrikaans parts, but I thought that you'll get enough of it.
Dankie dat julle almal betyds hier is. Is baie opgewonde om die nuwe program te begin met julle, en ek sien uit daarna wat ons vir die dag gaan doen.
So it's the start of the first day of the FLOW Ambassadors program, and I'm busy setting up equipment. We've got iPhones and iMacs, and we're setting up a base camp where they'll be given briefs over the next few weeks, and they'll be able to complete the tasks of it on base camp. And then we're setting up the iPhones so that they can make movies and take photos and various other tasks.
Vandaag is mijn eerste dag als mentor voor die FLOW ambassadeurs en dit voelt baie lekker. Ik heb nog nooit een mentor geweest. Dit is ons eerste. Dit is de eerste voor die FLOW dat die FLOW mentors heeft. En ik zie nogal baie uit om die trainen en die FLOW ambassadeurs te assist.
We are taking a photo of the museum. This is the activity for today. So we are taking photos. We must take 5 photos of the places we love. And the museum is one of it.
Ons is op pad na die Bergrivier munisipaliteit se kantore toe sodat die nuwe FLOW ambassadors hulle kontrakte kan teken.
Ashley. Hallo Ashley, aangename kennis. Baie welkom by FLOW.
Nicole.
Hallo Nicole, jy lyk bekend. Jy al gesien op die dorp?
Michaela, aangenaam.
Hallo Michaela. Nou waar gaan ons teken? In my kantoor. Kom, julle kan maar deurkom. Nou Alicia, dis 'n voorreg om nou hier jou kontrak te teken hoor. Vir jou flow ambassadeurskap. Nou kan jy ook teken. Bergrivier Municipality is a very proud partner in this program. We believe in the flow program and therefore our council also budgeted money to pay the flow ambassadors as temporary work employees of the municipality. And we are looking forward to this phase too. Ek sien jy's voor in die voor. Feigen.
Baie lelik geval, maar oorgeval.
Die flow ambassadeurs is besig met 'n video wat hulle skiet van 'n tannie in Witwater wat brood bak in 'n buiteoond en dit is deel van die reeks van stories van bejaarde mense in ons omgewing van die tyd voor Eskom.
For the moment, we are we're looking at our sorts that we did yesterday. They went to Fina's house. We are now putting the sorts together in sequences. So the sequence you're seeing here, you see she is preparing the dough for the bread.
Dit lijkt die man net 'n bietjie hulp nodig.
Dit lyk so.
Vir lunch het ons nou worsrolletjies, ons is nou besig om die wors op te deel en dan is ons besig om die rolletjies te smeer.
Ons gaan op na Jeremy toe. Hy het 'n plaas hier bokant waar hy vir ons gaan wys al die innoverende dinge wat hy doen om volhoubaarheid te doen.
Okay guys, welcome here to Crazy Cement Fly. What we're going to do is show you some of our systems that we're using for sustainability and just to look after the environment. If I feed the worms now, then what I do is I just pull the newspaper back and I put the salad leaves and I put the carrot peels and I put the pieces of melon and I put the stuff in there. And often you'll put some seeds in here and they'll all start growing. Okay, so you can have as many of these as you want. You know.
As part of the energy module of the Flow Ambassador program, we're visiting the Hopefield wind farm, where wind energy are used to generate electricity.
Ek dink baie hierdie is 'n goeie hernubare energiebron hoe krag opgewek word, kan opgewek word want dit is geen besoedeling van die lug nie.
So ja, dit is 'n skoon manier van elektrisiteit opwek, aangesien dit van die wind afkom. Maar soos ons luister ook na vir ons gesê het, die toergids ook vir ons gesê het dat dit wel 'n bietjie geraas maak, maar vir my is dit eintlik geraasie van dat op die einde van die dag is dit 'n positiewe uitkoms vir ons land, want dit is nou 'n nuwe manier om krag op te wek, besides steenkool en al die dinge.
We are building this solar plant to generate and create electricity directly from the sun. And we are bringing this electricity and selling this electricity directly to Eskom. So for each string, as you can see from the label, there is the positive cable and the negative cable. The area of the plant is 200 hectares. We installed here in this area 14,500 structures and 600,000 solar panels, expecting to feed up to 45,000 families here in South Africa.
Goeiemôre almal. Dis vir ons verskriklik lekker om vanoggend ons eregaste, die Flow ambassadeurs en hulle familie en gaste hier te verwelkom vanoggend.
I just want to say a big thank you to all of you and to all of us, because together we have made this work. And this is an example to the whole country, actually. If we can work together like this in the whole country, wouldn't it be amazing? So I think this is a moment that we all need to be proud of.
I'm gonna miss you.
Flash it so Mickey.
On fleek.
Flash it.
On fleek.
So hopefully you got some sense of the elements that were part of the program. And we did a lot with the individual ambassadors to develop themselves, both their agency and then their understanding of life support systems. Importantly, it was really hard to actually work on some of the climate change related issues, etc., in the first few months. And it was only later, when they had started to understand sort of some of the basics, that it became easier to engage on those types of topics. There was a lot around trying to map resource flows in houses to understand their sort of individual resource flows. They did some model making of their own houses. And there was a lot of mapping and a focus on the informal economy and how that was linked into the town. As you saw in the movie, there was a lot of training around making movies, which was actually a really important point of connection between the local government and the ambassadors. So the ambassadors, for example, made this movie at the bottom showing how the water system works in the area, where the water comes from in the mountains. They went and spent a day there. They went to the wastewater treatment works, made a movie of that, and showed it in the local IDP meeting. And so the local government was really happy to have their services shown in a way that often doesn't get highlighted. And the ambassadors felt very proud to have their movie shown as part of being recognized and having their voice shown. And then we worked on some of the elements of Seeds of Tomorrow, things that are already happening, really exciting stuff, as we've sort of said today, that is going on, and how do we share that and show that a new way of working is possible. And so I really think that this project helped to build this transformative capacity between the local government and this group of youth, but that was possible because of the individual agency developed among the youth and the social cohesion, both within that group of youth who had a new way of engaging in their community, and between then the social cohesion between local government and the youth, which comes back to the sort of model of transformative capacity. And as the municipal manager said, I've been doing social development for 20 years, and I can tell you this is the first program I've seen that can really constitute well-being in a community, just because it really felt like this well-rounded program that addressed so many aspects that were needed to sort of strengthen resilience. And so this project and some other work in Green Park Informal Settlement are sort of feed into a paper that I just published that was available from last week. And the Green Park case is a nice example of a local leader who really engaged local government in quite an innovative way, not through a sort of traditional process of ward councillors, etc. And so it's asking about how we can start to engage differently, not through the sort of traditional participation ways, but trying to find other ways of engaging. And so the three sort of conclusions that are also my sort of questions to you are, how do we make this happen more in the work that we're doing day to day? So the starting point should really be, I feel, that the everyday reality of the urban poor should be the entry point to identify priorities for transformative change and resilience. So for myself, working in the sort of climate field, yes, climate risk is important, but it needs to be placed in relation to structural vulnerability, and it can be. And so if we can reduce some of the structural vulnerability and the underlying vulnerability that contributes to the challenges of day-to-day life, then we can bring in climate risk as well, and you'll get the attention needed. Whereas if you just try and focus on climate risk, many people aren't going to be interested. And this really came out in the Green Park case, where they were living in a very flooded area next to the airport, Green Park Informal Settlement, but what residents really wanted there was electricity. And so by addressing the electricity issue at the same time as flood risk, there were a number of steps that could be made forward that managed to reduce both flood risk and ensure that they got electricity. Then I think for me what's really important, in the video you saw Ian speak a few times, who was the Flow ambassador, and having intermediaries such as the urban poor themselves who are part of this is really important, and that needs to be part of inclusive governance. And then lastly, local government need to draw on diverse modes of governance to engage themselves more fully with the urban poor. And contestation and deliberation is okay. We don't have to all agree. Actually, having spaces for these diverse perspectives to come to the fore is really important, and listening to multiple perspectives is where we're going to find a more resilient response that can have a more complex understanding of the problem and therefore have the solutions that can actually address multiple needs going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina. Any burning questions for Gina? We can take one, maybe two. Are you happy to engage with her during the tea break? All right, Gina, I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for your reflections and insights, and there's certainly much to learn of.